Kaya, everybody. Welcome to Youth Week WA 2021 KickstART Festival. My name is Jamie McGillivray, and I'm very happy to be joining you all on this wet Monday for community solidarity and the power of art with Soul Alphabet. And we have 4 people from Soul Alphabet here to discuss those things and many more. I'll be getting out of the way very shortly to let those discussions take place. Just a few things to go through quickly as we are broadcasting via Zoom and also on Facebook Live. But first of all, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that Youth Week KickstART Festival takes place on Noongar Budja, and we acknowledge the ownership and custodianship of the people who originate from this country, the Whadjuk Nation. We acknowledge traditional owners of country throughout Australia, pay our respects to elders past and present, and are committed to reconciliation and supporting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people. Like I mentioned before, for those of you tuning in via Zoom, there is closed captioning available. On the bottom right of your screen, there's a CC button, which as a participant you can click to get some closed captioning live. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, there is a Q&A panel. So part of my job will be to take any of those questions either from Zoom or from Facebook Live and present them to panelists towards the end of the hour. The rest of this stuff is pretty straightforward. I won't go through it in any detail. People can read. But yeah, so now what I'm just going to do is hand the reins over and stop sharing this screen and hand the reins over. Today we have joining us Adani, we have Anisu, Isaac, and do you prefer Sepsi or Naomi?
Sepsi.
Sepsi, thank you.
We don't use Naomi around here.
Okay, I should have checked beforehand. Apologies. So, like I said before, I'm going to bow out for now, and I'll be lurking in the background, make sure everything's ticking along nicely. But please feel free to take the floor, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. So my name is Benny, and I'll be the kind of, I guess, moderator for the discussion. And the discussion today will center around the power of art and creative practices in order to convey messages and narratives across our communities. So without further ado, we'll jump to some introductions, because today we've got a lot of wave makers in Perth and a lot of people that have been involved in a lot of creative initiatives over the last several years. So I'll just go in order of everyone that I can see. So let's start with Anesu, if you want to introduce yourself.
You're on mute, Anesu.
Yeah. Oh.
Classic. Okay, cool. But not on mute anymore. That's great. My name is Anisu Motondo. I go by they, them pronouns. I am a musician, Black rights and trans activist working here in Bolo. And I am passionate about creating safe spaces, centering Black, brown, and queer joy, and giving people a voice for injustices. Yeah, that's it. Who's the next person?
All right. Sepsi, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Yeah, my name is Sepsi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a DJ at the moment. That's the hat I'm wearing, but sometimes I wear different hats. I'm really concerned about self-preservation of my communities. So I do all I can to create spaces to protect and nourish like all Black people, queer people, or marginalized folk. And yeah, that's the work we're all doing together here.
Beautiful. And Isaac.
Hi, my name's Isaac. Can you guys hear me properly?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, my name's Isaac. I go by he, him pronouns. My primary platform for like self-expression at the moment is IX3, which is my clothing brand. So most of IX3 work is based on identity and like the exploration of identity, whether it's like who you are, like the place you were born, like your spiritual background and things of that nature, just everything that makes us who we are. So that's what I explore mostly through IX3. And through IX3 we do events, we make clothes, but there's so much more to it. And it just explores everything to do with identity essentially.
Beautiful. And I'll just quickly introduce myself as well. So my name is Adeni and I go by he, him pronouns. Over the last few years, I've been involved in a few initiatives, namely the Organisation of African Communities and the African Student Union at the University of Western Australia as well. And through that, I kind of honed in on Soul Alphabet. I've known the creator of Soul Alphabet since primary school, and seeing that come up was an opportunity to really focus on creating more safe spaces for Black and brown people. So definitely that's what I've been doing for the last few years. All right, so let's jump into the first segment of the discussion. So the first section is just focusing on I guess, the journey of all of your creative processes. And I was just wondering if you guys could kind of describe, when you first started, whatever you were doing, if you dabble in different forms of creativity, and if there were any sources of inspiration for you guys within the community, within your specific communities, whether that's in Perth or in Australia or within your suburbs. So if Anesu, you want to start that one off?
I mean, for me, in regards to like music, it's always been something I've been very interested in since I could ever remember, really. But it wasn't really up until the last couple of years where I really took it seriously and found myself in a position where I was giving opportunities to actually make that into a reality and make that into a career and make profit, which was really cool. I think when it comes to like people that inspire me or who have helped me in this community, I would be lying if I said Sepsi wasn't a huge part of that. I'd be lying if I said Linda and So Alphabet weren't people that, helped me sort of lean more into that pathway. Because if you think about it, like I only really got my first paid gig like 3-4 months ago. And that was Sepsi that got me that gig. And ever since then, it kind of hasn't really stopped. And I think when it comes to like, also I have an interest in like, event management and bookings and all that kind of stuff. And when it comes to learning about how to create safe spaces and take it from an idea and actually execute that out into community, out into these spaces, I think, those two people, Linda and Sepsi, are the ones that currently are the one like running this in the scene when it comes to our community. And I think it's important to practice acknowledging certain people that help you along the way, and not to like forget those people. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and on that note as well, big shout out to Linda and Sepsi. I think even personally as well, I know Linda really, it wasn't even just the idea of Soul Alphabet. I think it was more than that. It was seeing someone that was genuinely passionate about what they did. And that's what sold it for me. Like that's what really got me into it. And working alongside Linda has definitely changed my life on a personal level, and even Sepsi as well. I remember, I'll never forget the time when you came back from Melbourne and just, whoa, you definitely brought a different energy around Perth. So
Yes.
definitely, yeah, Linda and Sepsi definitely deserve all the acknowledgement. Yeah, all right, Sepsi, so
Where to start? No, similar to Anesu, like art and creativity has just been like just natural since I was born. I've always been involved like with music and church and writing, at school, I was always the kid who would like happily stay back at school on Wednesdays and Thursdays to write and read and like hanging out in libraries and all those things. And then after moving to Melbourne, some friends were doing a DJ workshop for Black women and just coaxed me to come along. And I was very much there, like with no interest, just wanted to hang out and just like be around amazing people. And it kind of like stuck. It's the only like creative thing that fully stuck with me. So I just took it and ran with it. And yeah, coming back home here has been like a huge blessing in disguise in terms of like accumulating all the tools that I had and just putting them to work to help myself and others. But yeah, I've just been so fortunate to always have mentors in my life who've taught me so many things in terms of event organizing and community, like rallying the community with in terms of like running things at uni and establishing a collective for Black students on campus. All of those things that like just seem really little, but when you put them all together, like, that's how we've kind of gotten here in the end. So yeah, that's a summarized version of how I got here right now.
And are you still dabbling in a bit of creative writing? Because I know you've done a bit of spoken word in the past. And
yeah. I'm just going back to the skills workshops. I'm doing a poetry unit in uni this sem, and I think the thing with Eurocentric learning is like, okay, I'll take what you have to say, and then like once you figure out how to do it the way they want you to do it, then you can say, oh, I'll do it this way anyway. But like you've got all the little things there to help you out. So yeah, I think as soon as I've got, I don't know, more skills just give me confidence. I like to accumulate things. So yeah, once that confidence for poetry comes back, and all the hats will be on. I'm going to need more heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for that one.
Definitely. Sweet.
Alrighty. And Isaac.
So my journey as a creative has been like, it's been a bit crazy. For the longest, I've always like had a form of creativity, like creative self-expression. So when I was a lot younger, I used to play a lot of soccer. And through soccer, I felt like from early was a way for me to express how I felt, like just have fun, essentially, because creativity is an expression of fun, things you enjoy. And ever since then, I started making music after high school, because I don't know, throughout high school, I did like music, but I was never really making music. I was still finding out about myself and finding out my interests and stuff. And yeah, after high school, I got into music for a bit, and this was through hip-hop workshops that we used to do in Herbgram and Mirrabooka. So around that time, like out of high school, everyone is trying to forge an identity that that encompasses all their interests and who they essentially feel they are as an adult. And so around that time, I was drawn towards music, and I was doing a bit of music. And no one took music serious at the time until we heard a guy called Miracle. So he now goes by Blessed Tunes. So yeah, around that time was the first African guy that we've heard on the radio. And I remember feeling what I felt back then. It was just like a different level of drive, and like made me feel like, oh man, like your dreams are valid, you know, because look, there's a guy there who looks like you, and he's doing something that you're doing, and you like doing on a bigger scale than you're doing it. So around that time, it made me feel like there's always a next level to take things. There's always and like we do hear things about representation, but it never really clicks until you feel it yourself. How seeing someone who looks like you in a space that you want to be in sort of makes you feel. And then yeah, like coming to where I am at the moment, it just accumulation of things, like hanging out with different friends. And then I feel like the biggest revolution in Perth was definitely like Soul Alphabet, because Soul Alphabet brings so many different interests together. And I told someone this before, that like creativity essentially is like a tree, and it comes from the same root and it branches out to different, different branches. So at the end of the day, we're all going to meet, and Soul Alphabet was kind of that perfect hub where everyone shared like similar interests, even though not the same. And it just allowed us to feel free and safe to express ourselves and find out more ways that we can bring other people into the picture. And yeah, so that kind of energy, I felt like brought a different level of drive and made me want to do things more full-time because it feels possible, you know? And so that feeling of things being possible and doable, and just being surrounded by people who make you feel like you can do anything is what has been driving my creative process at the moment.
Yeah. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to shout out Soul Alphabet again. For anyone who has not heard of Soul Alphabet or is unfamiliar with their work, definitely, you know, look at Facebook and look at the Instagram. Let me see if I can try and type the links below and the handles. Soul Alphabet has definitely been a catalyst for a lot of movements in Perth and a lot of new creative ideas as well. And even just recently, we can see, especially with the DJ workshops that we did, like we can see that it's starting to become quite infectious, and you know, we can see that it's starting to spread. So yeah, it's been really good. So I guess we partially answered the next question as well. I was going to ask you guys, was there a particular moment that kind of defined your purpose? Was there a moment where you realized, okay, this is the path that I need to go towards, or you know, this is my calling?
I think, I mean, yeah, like I said previously, I've always really been interested in music, and I've always been interested in politics. And I remember being like 9 years old and having a huge poster of Bob Marley and Muhammad Ali and Audre Lorde all in my room and being like, I don't know what this means yet, but I feel like it's important. And then kind of skip to 2019, but I lost my brother to what they call a invasion or whatever. Really, it was white violence. And I think it was through that experience, through the isolation that I felt, the lack of support from officials, government officials, police, kind of drove me into thinking, okay, there isn't community here at the moment. How do we find that? How do we build that? So that when these incidences happen, we have people to outreach to rather than having to deal with it on your own. And also maybe not even having to deal with it anyways, ever, really. And then skip to 2020, death of George Floyd, whole Black Lives Matter movement started to gain light and reactivate itself through that. And a few of my other friends who are also passionate about politics and Black rights and all that kind of stuff, we created an organization called Bolo Justice. And through that, we organized the first 2 protests here last year. And it was through that whole space and community that we were able to find and outreach other people and build community. Because I feel like I kind of think in this era where like there were so many different people that wanted community, we just didn't know how to find it or how to build it or how to find people. Because how do you find community, really, unless you create that for that space? Kind of what, you know, Soul Alphabet does. And so, yeah, it was through Bolo Justice and through that whole movement that I met so many other people who had the same ideas as me and the same interests and passions, and who wanted to not just make those ideas, but turn them into like action and community. And then after that, a couple months down the line, I then started, what's it called? Bad Habits, which is like an R&B event focused on Black, brown, and queer and trans joy. So many words to remember. And yeah, it just kind of inspired me to continue. And I think the biggest thing that changed for me actually on like a personal level was just like, okay, knowing that, seeing everyone around me create these spaces, create these events, and being like, okay, like I can actually do this. Like this isn't like so far-fetched from reality. Like I can actually make this a thing and continue to make this a thing. And I think for a lot of creative, that is probably what holds them back, is being like, yeah, I can do this idea, but who's actually going to support me? Who's actually going to listen and be there when that thing or event or space or thing happens? And I think it was the support from community that led me to believe like, oh, like yeah, I can do this, and this is nice, and I can continue to do this and continue to help and inspire others to have a voice and to take a stand. And hopefully that, like he said, Isaac, that sort of branch idea can sort of go into other spaces and community and other art creative spaces that I'm not in, and create that change, to be honest. So yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's like a word vomit to everything out, but yeah.
Yeah. I feel like for me, same with Anessa, like there's no clear like light bulb moment. It kind of like builds up. But from a really early age, like I was born and raised in Botswana, and despite that being a black country, I still like was in spaces that were really racist. So my first school was an Afrikan school, and the context behind Afrikaans people in Botswana commonly, like, you know, not speaking to everyone, but commonly speaking, they left South Africa and moved out to different countries because apartheid had to end, and they weren't really happy about their new status in South Africa. So they carried those apartheid sort of ideologies with them. And at a very young age, I was kind of exposed to that like form of racism. But, you know, conversely, I also grew up like my favorite movie other than Disney princesses was a film called Serafina, which is about the youth protests that basically triggered the end of apartheid. I used to watch that on repeat. I knew all the songs. So like I'm 6 years old and I know that I'm watching stuff that's kind of intense, traumatic and important, but then I'm also like, but it's a musical. So it's kind of like being conditioned at an early age without really understanding the implications of it yet. And then I remember the first wave of Black Lives Matter in 2014. I was in year 10 and I was up in Carnarvon. So I was in like rural Australia, same thing, only black kid around like white people, and just seeing how Indigenous people were treated up there was like something that I was like, this is really not right. But I just didn't have the vocabulary yet. And the first wave of Black Lives Matter really gave me that. It gave me the words to kind of like express how I've always felt, and like the result of that, and like the effect that it has on the psyche and on your mental health and all of those things. And I feel like from then it was kind of like there was no stopping me. Like I was known. Like I came back down to Perth in a white school again, but everyone knew you check what you're going to say before you say it around Sepsi, because she will call you out. Teachers knew that. The principal knew that. All the students knew that. They would, you know, I'll come to a house party and the problematic little white boys were warned by the girls at my school to just not say anything that will trigger me, because I wouldn't keep quiet about it. Like, Addie knows. Addie knows. Ask about me. Like, this is something that after that, there was just kind of no stopping me. And I just kind of had to go on that path of accumulating the skills to make something happen. So Melbourne had a huge role in that, because this is work that's been done. Like activist work in Melbourne is just so far ahead. Like it's something that we really need to catch up to and continue building up. And once again, just like meeting people who could really articulate things in a way that made sense and clicked with me, and like transferring that knowledge in a way that we can all expand and like the community to work to the same outcome. So after that, I guess like all those little things building up, they just like create a momentum that can't like be stopped. I don't see why it should be stopped anyway. But that's what we're seeing here as well, is those of us who have continued to expand that scaffold and do that work. It's contagious, and it's like it's picking up in different spaces, in the spaces that, you know, we have been hoping to see change in. It's starting in their own ways, and at least it's starting, you know, like, and we're all here to just kind of like guide it, we all share, we all like bring our experiences to the table and see what we can do about it. But yeah, that's my piece.
Wow. I don't even know what to say after all that.
Come on, Isaac, surely you got something.
For me, it's been very similar as well. It's like, I look at like, it's almost like, because we always talk about how a lot of things are written like the way our life pans out, sort of thing. And I kind of believe a lot of that for example, because I'm the youngest in my family. So I did not choose to be the youngest in my family. And being the youngest in my family made me more creative, made me more social, made it easier for me to go out and enjoy the things that I'm interested in, whether it be soccer, whether it be music. I always had that as my character. And I was always out there. I was very social. But then for some reason, when I was like around 20, 21, I became the complete opposite of what I was when I was younger. I was less social and I was more into myself and I was more introspective, and that taught me different things. So around that time when that change happened, it allowed me to when I was younger, it allowed me to explore many different interests. But then when I was older, it allowed me to sit with all these interests and explore them and find out what really interests me about them and how to expand on them and how to then go from a kid that likes to dress really nice and find out ways that I can monetize that and make it a platform for me to express myself, not only just make money, but tell stories that are important to me. So it's just that the change happens gradually, but once I became conscious of that change, it was more rapid, because now I know that, this change is happening and these are the these are the factors that contribute to it happening. So whether if I surrounded myself with friends that make my creativity less conceptual and more practical, so I can think of something and I know I have an audio engineer friend who I can go to and mix that audio if I need that done. And I know a videographer friend who can help me with that, and I know this friend who can help me with that. So having things around me, as I become more confident in the things that I create and how I create, I feel like I become more practical, and the gap between thinking and executing becomes thinner. And so I feel like that was the change, being conscious of that gap between I have an idea and I want to execute it, I want to do it immediately. Obviously, sometimes you have to wait for things to be at the right moment. But yeah, once I feel like, right now, just the idea of refining my design language or creative process is that's the change. That's what allowed many things to happen for me at this stage I'm in right now.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add as well, even personally, I think, like a few of you said, it's not really just one specific light bulb moment, but it's a progression or a series of events. And even for me, I think one of the things that always ties in with, figuring out my purpose was definitely the topic of identity. And this was something that I remember Sepsi and I had this conversation almost 2 years ago now, about identity. And something that I've noticed that was really lacking is the lack of complexity that Black people are given in terms of emotions. We are either happy, sad, angry. We're not anything in between. Or even in terms of, on a personal level, things that we enjoy doing. When my family moved to Australia, we moved in the 90s. So when we moved to our neighborhood, we were probably the first Black people that a lot of people had ever seen, and a lot of the stereotypes that people would kind of put on you came from American culture, because that's what we're seeing in the movies. And, growing up, music played such a big part of my, self-discovery journey as well. And I noticed that I loved things like, punk rock and psychedelic rock, anything acoustic. And that was kind of not frowned upon, but it was kind of like, oh, that's unlike you, that's not conventional. And it was just little moments like that that made me want to work in places that promotes people of color being complex, because we are all complex beings. When people aren't black and white, you are allowed to like certain things, and it doesn't mean that you have to dislike other things. So I think that was definitely a big thing.
Yeah, that's huge. I remember having that conversation because I've always been listening before DJing. I was like, I only listen to like indie bands and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I'm just realizing, and I think what makes it hard, especially like when you're really close to your community. So like the Nigerian community, they always kind of joke around with you and they'll be like, oh no, you know, you're Aussie, you're Australian. But then when you're around white Australians, they'll kind of tell you, you're not really like us. You might have the passport and the citizenship, but you're not quite there. So when you hear that repeatedly, you kind of get stuck in the middle, and you get stuck in a bit of a, journey trying to figure out where you belong. And then it was only in the last few years I finally realized I can be a part of both. It doesn't have to be concrete or black and white. We are all complex beings, and that's what makes us different and unique. Okay, so moving on to, I guess, the messages and narratives within the community. As creatives that have worked in various spaces, I wanted to know if you guys, when you first started your journeys, if you noticed that there were certain themes or messages that were missing within the spaces that you've worked in Perth, and if that influenced the directions in which you guys have taken in terms of your creative journeys.
I think themes that were missing or messages were usually around the language around intersectionality, kind of goes back into what you were just previously saying, into like, yeah, I'm Black, but there's also so many other parts of my identity that make up who I am. And I think that was really missing in the community, especially, but I think it's slowly changing, like it's slowly getting to a place where we can have those discussions, but it's still kind of got a long way to go, unfortunately. Yeah, just like the intersections of like gender and sexuality and race and background and money, finances, and all that kind of stuff, you know, other than just being like the Black person.
Yeah.
Because similar to Sepsi, like growing up, I was always like the Black person in every room that I walked into. And so you kind of just get thrown those stereotypes and those labels as being that person, but it's like, actually, like there's other things that are going on here other than just that. And yeah, it'd be cool to see more discussion about that, I feel like.
Yeah, I totally agree with Vanessa, especially on the point of gender diverse lineups. Like, for me, I feel like there's like the different levels of diversity that bookers will care about. It's they'll go, do you have a female booked on your lineup? It's like, yeah, we got one.
A female.
But everyone's all white. Like, what's that got to do with anything? And then, you know what I mean? Do you have a Black person? Yeah, but the Black person's male and the whole lineup's male. Yeah. Like even like within our own events, I was talking to NAFTA earlier, and I was like, yeah, you know, the last Networks event that we put on, neither of us clocked that we pretty much had an all-male lineup. We didn't clock it. Like, we're out here doing the work and we didn't clock it.
It's so ingrained. It's so normalized. Like,
no one thinks twice about it, that even we're making the same mistakes that we like go and fight about. But that's, for me, the biggest thing is gender diversity. We can't just look at like booking one POC, booking one, you know, Black person, one Indigenous. So like we have to look at all the other things as well and accept that like that multifaceted thing about being human. Like accept that. You know, we don't, all the things like what music do you play, blah, 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 that can come after, because we all are professionals. We all know what is expected of us, and we all can deliver at any given time. So that's one thing that I'm trying to really make sure I keep myself accountable with. And even with the Was a series, like I'm only going to book Black women primarily, Black queer folk, Black non-binary folk. Like, if it's dry and all my homies are busy, I'll book a man. I'll book a straight cis
Baby.
Black man. That, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I'm like, I just need to have one thing where I make sure I'm accountable, and it will like spill out into everything else the more that we normalize it. Like, we need to stop worrying about clout, we need to stop worrying about names, and we need to start worrying about if we're doing the right thing first. So,
and
practicing like positionality kind of as well.
Yeah,
because there's like a hierarchy that you need to be thinking about when it goes.
Yeah, because I made those mistakes because I'm a cis woman. Like, I'm not constantly having to think about gender diversity, because it's not. I haven't been super affected by things as a woman. I've had like certain privileges in terms of how I assert myself and how I can hold my own in a room of men, which is nothing that's ever fazed me. So there's certain privileges that I have that are like thrown back in my face when I book something, and I'm like, yeah, that's just very much, like, just because I'm a Black woman doesn't mean I'm going to do it right.
Yeah.
We always have to like be accountable.
It definitely is a period of also unlearning as well.
Yeah.
And holding yourself accountable and calling yourself out, because we all do make those subconscious decisions, and then it's okay to make those mistakes. It's been ingrained in us since we were born. However, you've got to do the hard work and be prepared to call yourself out.
Yeah.
And include that complexity as well. Isaac, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah. Are you able to repeat the last question just so I know I'm on point with the answer?
Yeah. So the last question, the last question was just about looking at maybe themes and narratives that were missing within the Perth creative scene, and whether that kind of influenced the direction that your work took.
Absolutely, definitely. There's one thing I was thinking about recently is the idea of because I was writing an article called "The Social Value of a Cool White Guy." So I was like, I was just thinking about the idea of what cool means, what a cool Black guy is, and what the sources of cool are. And I was just thinking to myself that, like, as Black people, you cannot have a cool Black person, because it's like the idea of cool essentially is created out of the rebellious nature of the Black existence. Like, Black people rebelling against the system all the time because the system was not built for Black people. And so that creates this thing where we're cool by default. And so what I realized, this ties into what my point is, when you're growing up, this thing of cool becomes a prison where Black kids live in, where you become like in a circle of your white friends, you're the cool Black person, and then you have to stick to things that are cool.
Yeah, the token.
You become so confined to the idea of being the cool Black person. And so these things are almost positive stereotypes. And so we live in this bubble where we're only doing positive stereotypes. But then I remember my cousin Lou, at the time when no one at all, like every Black kid, like being a nerd is like, it's just something that everyone shies away from, you get made fun of.
Yeah.
This guy was like doing graphic design in like 2006 or something. So he was doing these things like from a very early age. And I feel like those are the things that we're missing when we're growing up. So just the idea where Black kids are not confined by what cool is and what is cool and what you can do as a cool Black kid, or what your parents accept that is the normal job sort of thing. So it's a combination between what is acceptable by your parents and what is acceptable by society, and just dismantling this idea of cool being a factor which stops Black kids from doing, I don't know, becoming an astrophysicist or something, or like, just doing something that is out of the norm. So I feel like around when we're coming up, those are the kind of things. Like now, there's more spaces being created for completely different things that everyone has interest in, because we as Black people have a wide range of interests, and that's totally fine, and that should be accommodated at all times.
Mm.
And I think that you mentioned dismantling as well. The interesting part about it is that it's multi-layered. The dismantling also has to happen within the Black community as well, because a lot of these stereotypes, you'll find that they're also enforced or upheld by other Black people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in high school, I was one of 6 Black people in a school of maybe 1,200 people. None of them were my age, but I remember there was always this competition to be the quote unquote alpha Black man. And I never understood that. I was always someone that just cared about studying. Like I just enjoyed being in the library and reading and doing work. And, you know, you'd always get remarks like, oh, you're not truly Black because you don't fail your classes. And I was, that's when, you know, I really had to look at the stereotypes and be like, is this really what I want for myself or my children? If I have children, like, is that what I want to teach them?
Mm.
And it was just it just makes you realize that the dismantling process is multi-layered. Even amongst the older generation, like our parents, teaching them that it is okay to, you know, not be a doctor or not be a engineer or lawyer, you know, and explore creativity. And the funny thing with a lot of Black parents is they'll be so scared for you to delve into that aspect. But once you're successful, they will be there in the front row saying, that's my son, that's my daughter, that's my child, you know. So it's so funny. It's so funny. I remember seeing Skepta win an award and his parents were in full traditional clothing up on the stage with him. And it just made me laugh. So dismantlement on several levels.
It's true. I was going to add to the same point beforehand, because this is something that like is like a niggling thing in our Black community of like those labels that we so, you know, and rightfully so, like harshly taken back from white people. We've then gone, these are my labels. Yeah. I'm going to stick them on myself. Like that's one thing that I can't, I won't ever like accept, you know, because like, for example, this summer, I'd come back from the beach. I was like, yeah, you know, I did a swimming lesson and they're like, Black people have no business swimming in deep water. I'm like, you never know if anything happens. What's wrong with me learning a skill that could save either my life or someone else's? And then, you know, not long after that, we were on a boat and had a white man say, so, you know, there's been a few Black groups come in here. I'm just going to assume you guys need life vests because you're Black. And everyone lost it. And I was like, fair enough, y'all lost it. But don't forget, you guys also said to me a couple of weeks ago, what business do you have in the water learning how to swim?
Yeah.
You know, things like that where, like, which is why I say I focus on self-preservation. I think as much as we have people on the front lines looking outwards to dismantle the outside, we need to have just as many people asking us to look at ourselves and what we think of ourselves and how we're keeping ourselves and holding ourselves back as well. So I think that's equally as important as fighting like outside.
Agreed.
And also I feel like along that same lines of like the idea of us working from within, like there was another thing that I felt like is a debate that is almost, we know of it, but it's not as spoken about. So it's like the idea of how we as Black people, we speak of the idea of being tokenized in terms of opportunities, but then, and we also talk about the idea of Black owned and having a community. So like, for example, obviously like in Perth now we have like things like Soul Alphabet, and it creates this positive way of like creatives being able to collaborate. But then also there's an underlying like issue where sometimes certain creatives, it becomes about levels of platform. And it's almost like I have a bigger platform than you. Even though we're both Black creatives, I don't see how we can join forces and do something. It's more like a competition of platforms, you know? And so that is almost like something that we as Black creatives, we do sometimes. And it's, to me, it's worse than being tokenized by white organizations with opportunities, because and say, at least this person is providing you with an opportunity, whereas your own kind can't see what you're trying to do with whatever platform you have. And kind of it contradicts the whole idea of Black owned and being self-sufficient and stuff like that. And so I feel like that's one thing. Once we tackle that, it would allow us to be self-sufficient and empower us within to do our own things.
And yeah, and even on top of that point, you mentioned people giving other people opportunities. I think, and this ties in with what Sepsi's been reiterating about self-preservation. In order to preserve ourselves, our communities, and things like that, we also need to understand that there is a time to produce, but there's also a time to support. If there are certain things put in place that have already been put in place, let's support it. Let's nurture it. Because if we have 100 of the same thing, they're not going to grow. If we're all trying to spread our attention and energy across 100 variations of the exact same event, what's the point? Let's focus on the few people that have brought forth these ideas. Let's nurture them. Let's make something of it, instead of, whether it's intentional or unintentional, sometimes cutting each other down by, looking at how one person does something and then duplicating it. And all you're doing is just changing the name. Like, it's not productive. And that's something that definitely needs to be taken into account. One of the questions that I did have, when I wrote it, I kind of kept you in mind, Isaac, and it was about existing narratives within the community that you wanted to change through your work. And I wanted you to talk about your clothing line and your latest release, especially with the postcodes and things like that, because I thought that would be awesome.
I think it was something that was mentioned before about the idea of just reclaiming things, and telling a narrative that is that is informed by current affairs. So it's whether my first I don't know if I mentioned it before, my first line of collection that I dropped was at a Soul Alphabet event, and so I call it the Identity Capsule or Collection, and I had a shirt there that said refugee camp. And at the back of it says, we only seek refuge in the truth. So essentially, I was trying to say that in the world, everyone is a refugee. They're seeking refuge in whatever brings them comfort, whatever brings them ease. And those are the kind of narratives that I feel like are important for us to tell. By narratives that are informed by our African identity, about our Australian identity, narratives that are not just stereotypes, that are real lived experiences. Say, whether it's us and the experiences we had in Mirrabooka being a place where we were first introduced to Australia, where even though we lived in Kandula, my mom would go to Mirrabooka shops and talk to her friends for hours at the shopping center, or we go to hip hop workshops in Mirrabooka to stay out of trouble and go through there for school. Just so many memories that are important to us. And so when we hear the Mirrabooka that is negative in the wider community, and it does not align with the Mirrabooka that we lived in, if it gives you there's an urge to tell a story that's no, that's not the story. This is the story that I lived in. And so the idea of painting narratives, even with our most recent project, the collaboration with the Museum of Freedom and Tolerance, we were asked, because a lot of the themes were based on American historical events, and there were not many of African or Australian historical events. Well, there was the one with equality where one of the gentlemen from the '68 Olympics was Australian, but then we said that the only reason why we don't use different African themes is because a lot of the negative stereotypes that came from mostly came from America from very early. So Americans are very in charge of the African diaspora. And so when we get the American story right, we almost correct the other stories. And so a lot of us are viewed from that lens of American stereotypes coming down to us. So I just see which narratives are existing and how they're affecting us, and I try to put a spin on it to tell a story that oh no, but there's this other story. Or like we're Cotton Club, when we put on the dignity design, it was a nod to jazz music and how it trickled down to Nigeria and Fela Kuti, and how all these things are very, like, they're interconnected. So when we retell one narrative, it affects all the other things, whether negatively or positively. So I feel like it's always important to spin narratives in order to tell the right stories.
Do either of you want to add on to that one, Sepsi, Vanessa?
No, I don't have no thoughts. That's the first time you hear me say that. No, I got nothing to say.
Yeah, I think what you said is so spot on, Izzy. And even when you had spoke about identity and refugees and people seeking refuge and kind of what comforts them, it really reminded me of why, for a period of time, I struggled with like the Australian music scene, more specifically the Australian like hip hop scene, because a lot of the artists had identified with a lot of African American culture. I remember watching a documentary on a Perth artist. I probably won't name who they are. If you've seen the video, you've seen the video. And they were just like, yeah, you know, we're just trying to make it out the hood. And the camera literally moved onto their neighborhood. This neighborhood is beautiful, 2-story houses, nice, clean. And I'm like, what? Like, something here.
Perth is suburbia. We've got no hoods. This is suburban heaven.
It's not a thing. Like, and as funny as it is, it's kind of sad, because that's telling us that we're still searching for identity, and it's at a point where people would rather identify with a complete culture, with a complete life that they've never lived. You know, you look at some of these artists from America, and a lot of them do actually live what they rap. And you come here and you're trying to replicate that with none of that life experience. And it's like, that's a really big comment on identity and trying to, you know, discover yourself. So yeah, that's what that made me kind of think of. And I'll just skip forward to the last question that I had here. And it was just, as creatives who have, you know, all made a major contribution to the Perth scene, what messages do you hope are further conveyed in the future, and what narratives would you like to see, you know, shown or changed or even removed? What are some of your personal goals in that regards?
I want to see more narratives around gender and community. I feel like that's a conversation that we're not yet where we should be, to be honest. Like, you know, we're talking about Black rights and women's rights and all these other, you know, equality and injustices that are occurring. But when it comes to gender and sexuality, I still feel like that's a conversation that we're not yet where we should be, I feel like. So I'd like to see that be changed.
And I think even with the whole, you know, tragic passing of George Floyd, or the murder of George Floyd, one thing that it did highlight is that conversations surrounding these subjects are not supposed to be comfortable. And once people kind of grasp that, I think we can start to move forward and start to have more of these conversations. So definitely.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see more transgenerational discourse around these topics. I'd definitely like to see a lot more, and I'm really excited that this is Youth Week, like a lot more children and youth being exposed to ways in which they can express themselves in a healthy way. And, you know, that kind of knowledge around trauma and emotions, especially generational trauma. A lot of us are first gen here. These are things that, like, you know, if we have younger siblings, I might be the only one, but the younger ones who are like only remember here, but then they don't, there's still generational things that like ideologies and stuff in our household that probably don't quite make sense with their experience. Like we need to, as the first gen, we're still youth, we need to look after our little babies too. But we also, need to look after our parents, our grandparents, and like our elders and all of that stuff. Like I know one of the Soul Alphabet events, I was like, let's have an aunties night, for those whose moms know that they go to clubs. That's another thing in our community. But yeah, it was like, for me personally, so nice to have like my mom and her friends come and just be like, we used to do this. Like we used to be carefree. We used to be able to just like go out and dance and have fun. And to do that together, like what is there to be hidden? Because in a lot of our cultures, we have these ceremonies, you have traditional beer, like your first beer, your grandfather passed that to you, This is ceremony, this is family. The children are running around, you're with all your aunties, the women are sitting together, like all ages, all men are together, all ages. Like we need to bring these things back here and make sure that everyone is safe and protected and on the same page. And I don't think we can isolate like our different stratas in that way. Like it'll be nice if we can have all that intergenerational transfer of knowledge. The things that we're learning, there are things that we know now that our parents probably haven't had to know before, but now they're learning as well. And we also need to give them the chance to do that too. So that's what I'd like to see more of.
Mm.
And even kind of going back from what you said, Sepsi, I think maybe having more narratives about like mental health as well, and how, the society that we live in and all of the, stereotypes that are put upon us, how that affects us, even if we're not aware of it, so to speak, if it's not spoken about. I know, like, I don't know about everyone else's family, but I know back home, mental health is not something that is ever really spoken about, ever. It's kind of just like, oh, if you're feeling sad, go have tea, or go to church. You know what I mean? God, Jesus will help you, will pray for you, will get it sorted. But there's no like, no one takes it seriously. No one's like, oh yeah, maybe we should like talk to an actual doctor and like see how we can help you. It's like, oh, just shake it off, man. You'll be better tomorrow. That kind of thing. So I think, yeah, we should definitely be talking about that more for sure.
Yeah.
Even what you said, Sepsi, about intergenerational trauma, it's so funny because I'm sure if all of you talk to your folks and, or even your older relatives, they'll tell you, oh, a lot of them don't realize that they are traumatized and their coping mechanisms are just not like known to themselves. And they'll say, oh, this happened, but, we got through it and we managed to pick ourselves up and just da-da-da-da-da. But the older you get, the more you start to view your older relatives as more human and more vulnerable. And you realize, wait a minute, that thing that mum or dad or my uncle or auntie does, that habit that they have, maybe that's actually a coping mechanism for the things that they went through. And by having those intergenerational discourses, these are things that they can also realize. And it ties in with mental health as well.
Yeah.
Looking for help and also realizing that you can be religious, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of looking after yourself. The same way that religious people can still exercise, you should still check in on.
I'm gonna use that one.
You know what I mean? Mental health, because I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate that because my dad's a psychiatrist, but he's also a pastor. He started the first African church in Australia. He very, very fortunate to be able to pick his brain. But the way he always describes mental health is it has the exact same characteristics as a physical injury in the sense that it impairs your daily function and it does need time to heal. So the same way you would go to the doctor to check up on, a wound or a broken limb or something like that, you should go check in with maybe a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist to make sure that you're okay. And it can be preventative. You don't have to wait for something to happen to you to go do that. It's should be part of the regular processes. And I think sometimes because it's so intangible, we do neglect it at times. So mental health is always a big one. The amount of times you try and talk to your parents and they'll be like, oh, maybe you should just pray, you know, if you pray harder, you know, da 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 da. And it's like, okay, just Christians still go to get Panadol and Nurofen and prescription. So like what, or like any other religious people, we still follow those things. So why is it such a stigma to go see a psychologist, you know? Because when my parents, you know, are sick, they still get their antibiotics, they still do all of those things. So, you know, things like
it's something of like, oh, if we can't see it, then it isn't real.
Yeah. Big one. What about you, Izzy? Do you have anything to add?
For me, I definitely resonate with the intergenerational conversation that Sepsi mentioned, because I feel like it's the root of possible solutions for all the problems that we face as Africans. Because, like, as a first generational African immigrant coming to Australia, I never had any older siblings that went to high school and had the process of how to navigate through high school and after high school and what to do. So I feel like when that happened, I was kind of confused, and I was almost, it depressed me for a very short while, because I was thrown into a new place and I didn't know how to navigate. And so I feel like even with the older generation, it's kind of like it depresses them as well, because now back home, they used to go to a friend's house and they used to living a certain way. But now they're thrown into this space where they have to do these things this way. And that affects their mental health as well. And so that gap between the younger Africans and the older Africans, once we breach that, there's going to be more understanding between them. And I feel like there's the kids our age, they have both the energy and the mental clarity to do the right things, or do things that affect the community in a positive manner. And our parents, they have they might not have the knowledge, or they might not have the energy. But then kids younger than us, they have the knowledge, but then they don't have the drive. So I feel like we're the bridging gap between all the generations. And then, through that, I feel like we can have a very effective way of problem solving, where everyone is involved and everyone is contributing to the solution and bringing forth everything that affects them, no matter what their age group is. And then we can tackle a problem as like a united force.
Definitely agree with that. Very valid points. Beautiful. I guess that kind of brings us roughly to the conclusion. But before we go, I just wanted to give you guys the platform to kind of plug anything that you've got coming up, or any projects that you're working on that you want people to check out. So if you guys want to run through what you guys are up to.
I've got a single release for Black Girl. It's coming out tonight, midnight. Stream that shit on Spotify, Apple Music. Yeah. We got Wazza coming through as well on the 23rd of April. It's gonna be lit. Excited for that as well. There's actually so many things to plug now that I think about it. But those are the main ones. Yeah.
Yeah, as Ines said, Wazza's coming up. So on the 23rd, so Wazza prioritizes Black and queer folk. Come through. There's a sliding scale at the door just to remind people of their positionality in spaces, in public spaces. So that's the reason for it. If there's clarification needed, I'm always here for a chat. I also work with NAFTA losing all my words. I work with NAFTA and we both run Networks. So Networks is also a community that's just trying to create a safe space for a lot of marginalized communities, and we're just trying to create a network, in case you didn't know why we called Networks, of creative individuals where we can share resources, share knowledge, and just like enjoy each other's presence. So keep an eye out for an upcoming gig. Just watch. But yeah, for now, I think that's all I have at the top of my head.
For me, like at the moment we have a project, the collaboration with Museum of Freedom and Tolerance. So that will go online on the website on Friday, I think. And yeah, we shot the lookbook with Anesu and a few of the other focus group participants. And sorry?
Is that coming this week?
Yeah, it will go online this week. And I should be able to get the pictures back by Thursday. So I'll post the lookbook as well.
Okay, excited.
We have a big project in May. I think May. It's still in the works yet. Yeah, so just a few other stuff, like a few projects lined up with IX3, which will be revealed as the rollouts get there. And yeah, at the moment, it's just the main project is the Museum of Freedom and Tolerance collaboration.
Also, another event we should be plugging, Diamond District this Friday. All of us are in it.
We're literally, like we're all playing. So that's funny.
We're all on the lineup. And none of us mentioned it.
Also, yeah, I forgot about my like DJing gig at Kalinga.
Oh,
yes!
IZ's debuting.
IZ's club debut.
There we go.
I'm so excited for this one. Honestly, your Instagram stories, IZ.
I'm nervous.
No,
I'm scared.
I don't want to hear it.
I'm very excited. It's very excited because like that's how exactly I felt at like at Nafta's house, and then the nerves that became excitement. So like I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah,
I feel like that's how it always goes. But once you just get through those first few songs and you just find your footing, you're gonna.
Nerves are good. If you're nervous, it means you care about it. And it means it's worth your time. So it's not a bad thing.
Excited.
I'm excited for this one. It's going to be big.
Definitely.
Be big. In terms of Soul Alphabet, we've got a few things running this year. We actually sat down and did a bit of planning. So we hope to bring back No Borders. So No Borders was the... for anyone that doesn't know, it was the series of recurring events that we ran over the summer at the Bird. We're just working on doing a few more age-inclusive events. So just having events for people of all ages and also incorporating a live music element as well. So watch out for this July, it's going to be big. And also DJ workshops as well. So that's something that will pop up probably around the end of the year for anyone that's interested in learning the ones and twos. In terms of...
You have the book launch this Friday.
Oh, there's a lot happening. Bottom line, there's a lot happening. Book launch this Friday. Diamond District on Friday as well.
Urban Youth Center come through.
Youth Center coming through. There's a lot. Anyone that's not in Perth, you need to be here.
Yo, that's true. That's true.
Don't sleep on Perth. Things are definitely moving. So
we'll wake over here.
Yeah, we actually should. Personally, I have finally stopped procrastinating. I'm working on music production. So we were talking the other week about Afrocentric music and like the modern sound and kind of tracing it back to like the origins. So that's basically what I'm working on. I'll be collaborating.
Oh, okay, exciting.
I'm collaborating with someone from back home in Nigeria. So we've just kind of figured out all the logistics and hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have some stuff for you guys. So very exciting year.
Yes, big things, isn't it? Big things.
Very big. All right. Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for sparing your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, such a beautiful discussion. Always good to have you guys on board. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right,
Thank you all for your time.
For having me and us.